More than once, I have had an executive of a company tell me, oh no, I don't want my employees to be creative. I only want them to be innovative. And then I have to try not to laugh because it's so ridiculous. And I'll explain why it's so ridiculous in a minute. But another thing that I sometimes hear is executives say, yeah, no, I don't want my employees to generate ideas that won't work. I only want good ideas and I only want them to be innovative. Okay, just in that statement, you're actually shooting down some possibilities for innovation. But more importantly, here is both of those statements are filled with misunderstandings and confusions about what creativity and innovation actually is. So, in today's video, we're going to look at the difference between creativity and innovation. We'll look at the differences, and then really the big question is the difference important and does it even matter? We'll dig into that as well. My name is Dr. Amy Climer. I'm an innovation consultant and keynote speaker, and I teach teams and organizations how to be more creative by teaching them my research-based process called the Deliberate Creative Team System. It's also laid out in my book, Deliberate Creative Teams, How to Lead for Innovative Results. All right, let's look at the differences between creativity and innovation. When we're defining the differences between creativity and innovation, the response will depend a little bit on who you talk with. So there's two camps that I've seen in my work. The first camp are the creativity researchers. These are the psychologists, the sociologists, all the ists, all the scientists that are looking at what is creativity, how does it work, when are we more creative, when are we less creative, and they're doing research, and they're publishing that research in creativity journals. And these journals are peer-reviewed, meaning there's other scientists who are determining, is this research any good? And if so, is it worth actually publishing? And so there's a really good check and balance system there. So that's one camp. And then sometimes in another set of literature, in the business management literature, we'll see a different perspective on what creativity is. In the work that I've done, and I am a business management consultant, an innovation consultant, yet I tend to align myself with the creativity researchers because they are the source. They are the ones who are deeply understanding this. And a big part of creativity and innovation is they are multi-stage processes. And there are different variations of these processes, which we'll get to in another video. But every single process has a late stage that's some variation called implementation. Meaning that creativity, the implementation stage is part of creativity. And without that, we don't have creativity. So let me clarify. The creativity researchers, the definition they use is something like creativity is novelty that is valuable. Okay, so novelty meaning something original, new, unique, different. Valuable could be financially valuable, aesthetically valuable, but somehow you're bringing value to the situation or to the context. But you don't know if something is valuable until you implement it. You might have what you think is the most amazing idea, but it is pretty much worthless until it is implemented, until you try it out and you see, well, will this actually work? I mean, when an idea first comes out of our head, they'll fit on a Post-it note. It's not that valuable yet until you implement it. So that makes a lot of sense to me that creativity is novelty that is valuable, and the implementation is a very important part of creativity. And then the difference is innovation is creativity with economic gain. So we tend to use the word innovation when we're talking about, business, science, technology, whereas we often will use the word creativity when we're talking about the arts or humanities or literature, where maybe that financial, that economic gain is not as important, although it can be a nice plus. Now, to go back to the two camps, we've got the creativity researchers and the business management consultants. The business management consultants will sometimes say, well, creativity is just the generation of ideas and innovation is the implementation of those ideas. And I think that's really where the source of confusion that we get from, the executive I mentioned a few minutes ago, where he says, oh no, I don't want my employees to be creative. I only want them to be innovative. And really what he's saying is I care about the results. I care about what's coming from all these conversations or brainstorming sessions, which makes sense. And I actually agree with that. Unfortunately, the challenge with innovation is there is a risk and we never quite know what's going to happen. And if we try something, will it work? We'll talk about risk in another video. Okay, let's go back to this difference between innovation and creativity. So we've talked about how the phrases, the words are sometimes used differently in different contexts, like the arts versus technology. In fact, as an example, we'll often say, someone like the artist Georgia O'Keeffe is very creative, where someone like the former CEO of Apple, Steve Jobs, is innovative. Really, if we're breaking down what they did and what they produced, they are following a similar process. I'm talking at a high level. Obviously, painting is different than building an iPhone. But if we're looking at a high level, they have both followed a similar process of a creative process in order to implement these new ideas. Here's the big question, though. If both creativity and innovation, if implementation is a part of the process, which I believe it is for both of those, I really believe that ideas are almost worthless until we do something with this. And you've probably seen this in your life. You might have had an idea in your head for a long time, and it just doesn't go anywhere. You got to do something with it. In fact, maybe as you're thinking about it for several years, you see someone else run off with the idea. Because, maybe there's sort of this, a little bit of like a romanticized idea about ideas that they just sort of float around the universe and they land in somebody's head. And if that person doesn't do anything to them, the idea just wanders off to somewhere else. Elizabeth Gilbert talked about this a bit in her book, Big Magic. And I thought that was a really, I liked that visual to think as a way to think about creativity and ideas. But again, the implementation is important. Now, here's the real question. Does it matter if we're determining if something is creative or innovative? I would say probably not in most cases. I mean, if you're looking at this from a business perspective, which is mostly how I look at creativity, then that economic gain does matter eventually. That's important. But we still have to go through that creative process. And in the end, it's like maybe the difference is just that financial value. I think what really matters is in the work that you're doing, are you producing work that provides value? Does the work, is it novel, and does it provide value to your customers, your clients, your community, whoever you're focused on? Is it providing value that solves their problem in a way that works really well for them? Maybe in a way they never imagined in the first place. That's creative. That's innovative. If you want to dig in more and understand how innovation works in a team and in an organization, check out my new book, Deliberate Creative Teams, How to Lead for Innovative Results. And if you have more questions about creativity and innovation, put a comment in the YouTube chat and I will be happy to make a new video for you based on your question. It's so good to see you. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in future videos. Bye.